Well, welcome back to all of you. I hope you've enjoyed the first session. Now we're going to take out the guts. And you're going to feel it in your guts and see what happens inside. Because it's important that you understand how this thing works. Last night, or actually 2 days ago, my little girl said to me, I feel hot on the inside. And without realizing it, she became in touch with her body. So she realized something is wrong on the inside. She told me, I gave her remedies to take, and a few hours later she was perfect. Whereas the little ones, the 18-month-old and the who was the other one? The 4-year-old that was sick. We've got 6. I have to think a little bit. They couldn't tell me. You can only see when they've got a fever. Oh, then it's almost too late. Well, not too late, but it takes longer. It took 18 hours with both of them to get them right. But if you can pick up immediately when something starts going astray in your body, and you do something, you can quickly correct it. It's like you don't have to drive into the pole before turning the steering wheel. You can fix the dent if you're not dead. But you can fix the dent, but if you're seeing you're going off track and you just bring it close in, it's so much simpler and so much more cost efficient. And so much less trauma for the rest of the house. So, we call this understanding the puzzling way this fits together. And this is your body, and we're going to show you a little bit about how the body works. And just look at this picture. Isn't it awesome? Who can tell me what that is? Something inside the body. You're right, yeah. Now, you know what that is? It's part of the tongue. Isn't God just awesome? I mean, just look at that. So this guy obviously didn't brush his teeth, but okay. So what we have there is, we start with the mouth, and I'm going to show you here. This is Fred we have, incidentally, here. Fred is spilling his guts for us today. And we start with the mouth. And inside the mouth, and this is the tongue here. You can't see it very clearly, but from where you are, but this is the tongue. And the tongue is very important because that's what makes you taste stuff. You can move food around. In the old days, when they wanted to really get to you, they cut your tongue out. Certain foods very difficult to eat. I mean, just try and eat when there's a fever blister on your tongue. It's really, really difficult. Now imagine if you didn't have one. But you just take it for granted. You won't be able to speak, eat properly, chew properly, all those things. So this is where we are. And we have some taste buds on the tongue. I'm just going to keep it very simple. It's not a physiological or anatomy lesson. We're just going to see what happens inside. Now, what's important is that when you take something and you start chewing on it, why do you chew on it? I mean, why did God make it such a way that you have to chew stuff? Because when you start chewing, certain enzymes are secreted by these glands below here. They then start digesting the food. That's called amylase. It's one of the first enzymes. It creates something called chime. It's not the thing that goes ding-dong on the wall. It's chime. That is something that goes down into the esophagus. So the next thing that we then get to is it also warns the stomach. So the stomach is down here, and it sits right about here. And it starts warning the stomach from the brain that something is on its way down to you. Be careful, something is coming. Now just think for a second, just think. If you drink a shake every morning for breakfast, goes bypass the whole system and lands up in the stomach, and the stomach wakes up and says, hey, what's this? And you don't have the proper enzymes there, so hence you don't find much shakes in nature. Okay, just a side note. So, next thing that we find there is this is the esophagus. Picture that you see there is this thing going down here. From here, it's going down, and it comes into a valve in the stomach. So there's a little valve in the stomach, and the valve opens, and it comes into the stomach. Stomach actually doesn't sit down here like most people, they look like the stomach sits there. But this one actually is right up here, and it's a fairly small thing. It's basically the size of 2 fists held together like that. So if you want to force down a big plate of food down your 4-year-old, not that we ever want to do that, but I mean 2 little fists, it's basically just that size. Really, really small. And so one has to be careful of that you don't eat too much. Good. So then we get to the stomach, but the esophagus is basically the pipe that takes the food down into the stomach. And that's right where it is. It moves the chyme down. It opens, it warns that the valve's going to open. Now, if you have acid reflux, that means that from the stomach, acid pushes back up. This valve doesn't close properly, and then it goes back in, and you go, you know, you have to take an antacid. It's terrible. Or a wind comes up, you know, something is brewing inside here, and you go out the top. And then it lands up in this ugly place, and this is called the stomach. And this is it here. Very small organ, but very, very strong. Okay, it's got strong acids inside there. And what then happens in the stomach, it moves and more crunching takes place. Now, if you didn't chew the food properly up here, then you have poorer digestion down here. Why? Because it doesn't have teeth. Can you see any teeth in there? No. Okay, so you have to chew. Grandma was right. You have to chew and chew and chew. And so now you can see when you're on the run and you're grabbing a hamburger and some fizzy drink and you're just gulping it down just to get this thing bulging inside here, because there's enzymes and there's hormones inside that tells your brain, find food because I'm hungry, I need food. There's all kinds of processes happening. And all this is controlled by the master up here. And the master up here is the brain. We just take Fred's brain out there for a minute. And this is the brain. Fred has a rather petite brain, but he's very intelligent because his brain tells him that now my blood sugar is dropping, open the mouth, get the hand out, take the muffin, take the paper off, eat it. You know, because he has learned that if you eat it with the paper, it doesn't digest so well. So now it comes back in here and it starts secreting the acids. It crunches it on the inside. Hydrochloric acid comes in, other gastric juices gets mixed in. You don't want your finger in there because it's really, really burning inside there. Now, one interesting thing is as you grow older, your stomach acid goes down. So older people usually suffer from indigestion. And what you find is that you have less stomach acid as you grow older, hydrochloric acid. And now, because there's not enough acid, the food starts fermenting on the inside. And you get an acid reflux. It pushes the valve the other way, and it comes up the esophagus here. And what you then find is that you drink an antacid. So you don't have enough acid, and then you drink an antacid. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So the valve opens at the end of the stomach again, because on the other end, there's another, and it's called a sphincter valve. Think of your raincoat that you pull around your face. It's a valve like that. It just goes zhook, zhook, like a camera lens, and it opens and closes. Amazing stuff. And all those need various nutrients, which we'll discuss later, to work properly. And if it doesn't have them, they don't work. Simple, you know, like your car, same kind of deal. And then it enters the very interesting, the picture that you see there is a picture of the gallbladder on the inside, hence the sort of greenish color. But then we have an interesting guy here, and it sits right about here, and it's called your liver. And it's just under your right breast. You can feel it there, under your rib cage. It's very protected. And this is an amazing piece of equipment that you have. It is a filter. But filter is one of the functions that it has. It has more than 500 functions that we know of. And we don't completely understand how this thing works. In fact, it's so amazing that if you just have a little piece of this working, you won't even know that you've got, say for instance, you've got liver cancer. It's very difficult to know, unless the doctor checks it with a reading. It's very difficult to see. Because, and this is the only organ in the body, if you cut a piece away, it'll grow back. Now, every 15 minutes, all the blood that you have in your body circulates through here. Every 15 minutes. So since you've been here, since the starting of the session, you're almost in your second filtering. From your head to your little toe, all the blood goes through every 15 minutes. Day in, day out. Sleeping, waking, running, playing rugby, watching rugby, you know. It works harder usually when you watch rugby. And then also with this is the little green piece on the inside. That's called the gallbladder. The gallbladder doesn't make gall. It just stores it. It's made inside the liver. And the liver secretes it, goes into the holding tank. And when you have your piece of boerewors coming down, it sees there's fat and there's meat. And it secretes bile acid. Goes, this little green gallbladder secretes the bile acids. It goes inside. It gets mixed. And we'll get to the point where it gets mixed. And then it can help digest the actual fat. So it also, the liver adds enzymes, it adds digestive enzymes, bile gets secreted, it filters the blood constantly, like I just explained. And then we get to an interesting part here, and it's called the pancreas. And the pancreas sits, this is the colon here, but it's a little piece that sits right on top here. And so if the liver fits in here, and the stomach goes here, this is where your pancreas is. And the pancreas is a very interesting mixing tank. It actually produces, depending on what comes in here, so see, it's important while you chew, Fred's brain here, the petite brain, it recognizes it has a path lab in here, it's called the hypothalamus. It analyzes all the wonderful food that comes in while you're chewing it. It checks it out and it says, okay, pancreas, what you need to do is to make up A, B, C, D, E, and a little bit more and a little bit there, and it does it. And when it gets to the duodenum, which is the mixing part, it secretes this wonderfully pre-mixed in there. The mix of enzymes, and your food amazingly, it gets dissolved or digested. And this is where it is. This is the liver, and this here is the pancreas. And it gets mixed in here. This is called the duodenum, where it gets mixed in. It adds the enzymes, and then it sees, well, see this thing, Fred's brain, he has the path lab, they analyze and see, okay, now we've had a piece of white bread with jam on it, and bzzz, the blood sugar starts going up, and Fred's going to run into a problem. So he says, oh, we have a problem. Now, quickly, make another hormone now. It's called insulin, and it goes into the blood without you knowing any of this, and it happens, and it secretes it, and it brings down the blood sugar. So it takes the sugar out of the plasma, which you'll see in a minute, goes into the cells, and you feel wonderful again. So, just from a little bite that you've had, that's what happens. And then it moves along, because that's not the end. Now we get to the small intestine. The small intestine is this part here. And so what we've got from now is that it goes down from the mouth, esophagus, goes into the stomach, it gets mixed, and then it comes down into the duodenum. That's the small intestine, a long one, quite a long one, small intestine. But this is a microscopic section of it, and it's amazing because inside is these folds. This is tiny, tiny, tiny. You can't see it with the eye. And what you see there is these are pieces of mucus or food, and it would pass right in there. And inside there are enzymes and good bacteria and all kinds of things that take the piece of hamburger that you just had off there and into, and this here is where all the blood vessels and the transporting system connects with the food. So it goes across the membrane into, and now you'll see it in the blood. And that's how it gets from your mouth into your blood. Now, if you eat food that is not so good, it doesn't get well absorbed in here, or you might find an allergy, or if you drink lots of tea, it coats a little film on top of it there. So it gets blocked, it can't go through. Interesting things. And that is our small intestine on the inside there. Good. And so it moves into the small intestine. It breaks down further. One interesting thing about the intestine is that it moves. It doesn't just go from A to B. It goes A, B, B, A, B. It moves to and fro on the inside. Goes. That's when sometimes you're hungry, you will hear dunk, 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 dunk on the inside because there's nothing in there. And so that's the way that, because it washes the food over the villi and those tiny little villi on the inside, which we can see on the screen. It washes it over it, and then the food gets broken down into further pieces. So it's important that you chew properly. So because if you don't, there's no teeth there, it can't break it down properly. So it gets in there and it's done. And so we move along. Now we get into the large intestine. And the large intestine is also called the bowel. And on the back you'll see from the small intestine it comes, this is actually where it goes out, but you can't properly see where it comes in on the inside there. You have sort of a holding bag there. The tiny little thing there is called the appendix, which your doctor will tell you it's not needed. But it's very much needed because that is the oil can of the large intestine. So you know the oil can, it goes when you've had diarrhea. Where do you get the good bacteria from again? They live inside there. So if this thing gets inflamed or it gets septic, it's very dangerous because it's filled with bacteria. And if you have an appendix that bursts on the inside, it's all septic. So you don't want to do that. But if you cut it off, you'll have probably a lot of indigestion problems for the rest of your life. It's important to have it. But so this is the holding tank. Then the small intestine comes in here, and then it starts, the food starts going into the large intestine. The large intestine has 3 parts, if you can imagine this. This is the ascending colon. It's coming up. Then you have this piece here, which is called the transverse colon. And then you have the descending one on this side here. Now, this is the important one because this piece here, the transverse colon, is the most undivided tissue in the body. Simply means it's very, very simple tissue, very soft tissue. And if you constipate it, it means, we'll show you in a minute what it means to be constipated. This can actually go down. It sags out like that. It's kept up with ligaments and it goes down. And it pushes on the bladder, which is down there. And suddenly, if you cough, it's wet. Or you can have other problems. It can actually give you backache in the back of Fred if this moves down, because you see there's not much space there. Now, Dr. Bernard Jensen, world authority on the bowel, says he did a lot of autopsies. And what he saw was that you sometimes get a bowel with a diameter of 12 inches and with the orifice of a pencil. That's how clogged up it can become on the inside. So it's very important that we eat the correct foods so that when they land up in here, that they can actually move along properly. And then, this is a final absorption. In the large intestine, most of the water gets taken out because in the small intestine, there is still a lot of water because it has to move. And it's got all kinds of funny kinks and it has to move through that. And so the water is removed, and the last bit of absorption is done in there. Now, if you have your muesli in the morning, wonderful, you know, the nice thing about muesli, it's so crunchy, right? Good. Now, why is it so crunchy? Because it's so dry. You eat it with your wonderful yogurt, it goes down into the colon, you don't drink enough water, and it absorbs the water in the colon. And the colon absorbs it, and now you suddenly have cement on the inside there. And it sits, and it sits, and it brews, and it putrefies. So it's very important that you help the colon to move, because the colon on the inside, as we'll see later, has some wonderful friendly bacteria that helps it to move. Interesting thing about the colon is that it has more or less half the nerve endings of Fred's brain. So if you were to cut that in half, the nerve endings, this is how much is in the large intestine. So when you can say, my bowel has a mind of its own, you're right. When you say, I feel it in my gut, you do, because it has a mind of its own. It's amazing. It's actually very, very interesting. So it's also called the second master of the body. If this does not work, Dr. Bernard Jensen said, all diseases start and end in the colon. If this guy doesn't work well, you're in trouble. Just think, if at your house the municipality were to strike for 1 week, what a mess it is. This is your municipality, your waste removal. If it doesn't work, oh, you're big trouble, big trouble. Good, so now we're getting to the blood. The blood is so interesting. Why do we have blood? Well, some people say, you know, it's just internal organic soup. And it's probably true. And you'll see it in a minute. It's the transport of the nutrients. So now, remember, the food is absorbed in here and it goes into the blood. What's the blood? It's just all blood inside. No, it's not all blood inside. You've got veins and you've got arteries pumping those via the heart to and fro inside the body, and it moves. And it brings the nutrients from the food into the actual cells, not just into the stomach. Because the stomach takes it out and digests it like we saw, and it then takes it into the rest of the body. It also transports oxygen. So when you go, and it goes through the lungs, which we'll see now, it transports the oxygen in, and you go, out comes the CO2, the carbon dioxide. And that's part of what the blood does. It transports it. And the blood consists of three things. It's what you see on the screen. It's amazing. It looks like a disc, like a donut, but without a hole in it, just a little dent on the inside. That's called a red blood cell, or it's also called an erythrocyte. It's the red blood cell. Then you have the white blood cells, and those are your fighters. There's your army. If you don't have those, you're in trouble. You sometimes hear of somebody, you know, that's really sick, and they say, oh, he has a very low white blood count. That means his army is wiped out, or he's not producing a new army. And then you'll hear them say, oh, we need to give him extra platelets. He has no platelets. The platelets are interesting things because they are like little spiders. They almost look like a spider. And so when you get a cut or a prick on your finger, they hook together and they quickly make a clot so that you don't bleed yourself to death. Amazing. And what you'll see in a minute is how that's going to happen. So, they are disc-shaped, the red blood cells, these ones here. Now, if you see the size of this here, just imagine that you can put 5 million of them, more or less, in a millimeter. A millimeter is that size, by a millimeter, by a millimeter. You can put 5 million of them here. Amazing. And you'll see it in a minute. Isn't it just awesome to think? And you can see on this, you'll see little pieces there, and that's some of the food pieces that gets transported all around the body. Just flows. The red is the hemoglobin of it. The oxygen carriers, it takes the oxygen out the cell of your blood cell and into your muscle cell. We'll explain a little bit on how that works. Then we have the white blood cells. This is a natural killer cell. It kills anything that naturally shouldn't be there. They're also called the leukocytes. You have only one kind, more or less, of red blood cell, but you have more than 250, maybe even more, white blood cell types. They're part of the army to protect you, and they are the phagocytes. Have you ever cut yourself or a thorn stick in you? Have you seen that? And it starts pushing out pus, white pus, and you think, oh, it's inflamed. You know what actually happens there? It's these guys, some of them, the phagocytes, they club together and they start forming pressure from the inside. So if we were to take that pus and put it under the microscope, we will see just phagocytes and a few dead cells and so forth. But it basically comes into the skin and it pushes it, and that thorn gets pushed up, and it pops out, and you go, and you push it with your finger, and it's out. And they've successfully removed the thorn in your flesh. Amazing, isn't it? And we thought it was just all blood inside, organic soup. So now, what I'm going to do is, will you come and let's see if we can find out if you have any blood inside you. What is your name?
Fever.
Okay, so let's have a look. First, we're just going to quickly clean off your finger so we don't get any bugs from the outside going in. We're just cleaning that off and then drying it so we don't get the alcohol on the microscope. Not that it's very cool on the inside here, but we just have to. You don't want to blow on the finger, no, because then you breathe and he sort of inhales it through his skin. And then this is a little cover plate from the microscope. Okay, just turn your hand around, hold it like that. and we make a slight prick, and there we can see some of the blood coming out. Just relax your hand. Great. And you can sit down, thank you. And now we're just going to put it on here and you can see it. So the blood, you can see on the screen there, those are your red blood cells. And mostly all of them are red blood cells. And I'll explain to you in a minute what you can see there. The blood is absolutely amazing. These are the red blood cells, all of them. What is inside is called the plasma. That's just the stuff that makes up. If you have food, they'll be floating around here now. We can see that you haven't eaten lately. Okay, we'll eat now, don't worry. We'll take another sample and show you the food on the inside. And his blood actually looks really good because they should be all separated. They shouldn't all be clumped together. Now let's see if we can see something else there. Yeah, what we can see here is a platelet. I'll show you what that looks like. This here is called a little platelet, and that, and that, and that. Those are the platelets, just little black dots. Now, just incidentally, if you were to look under a normal microscope at home, this is what it will look like. So can I say, don't attempt this at home, because you won't see much, but that's what you'll see. So we've got a special microscope just to give you some interesting facts on the blood. Just need to get it back where it was. Good, and let's see if we can see some other interesting things. Now, if we go to the side of the slide, you'll probably see the cells dying off. And that's where we can usually see this, which is called a crystal. You didn't know that your body can actually make on the inside diamonds. Well, it's actually not diamonds, but it's a little cholesterol crystal, and what we see from that is not that you have cholesterol, obviously. That means it's a building block of your hormones on the inside. And there are many other things that we can see from the blood, which we probably should not go into, but let's see if we can find something else that's interesting. This here shows to us that you're not drinking enough water. Where's your water bottle? Maybe take some more, and we have some filter water for you. You can see that there's a little crystal, and that usually comes from the kidney, showing that the kidney is under stress. And what you'll see on the inside there, if you can't see it, look on the big screen, but there's a little bacteria moving. Let's see if we can see it here. It's very faint, but you can see it moving there. On the inside, little bacteria. Now, bacteria is even smaller than the blood. And we should, this is an interesting little cell here as well. This shows you that your blood, or that this is a little echinocyte, it's a fancy name of it. It shows that you're not drinking enough water. It's secreted by your kidneys. So it comes in from the kidneys showing, we're stressing, we need more water, we need more water. So on that point, just so my blood doesn't look like it, take some water. And there's another bacteria floating and another one floating there. And sometimes what we can see on the inside of people is we can actually see parasites. Don't let anybody tell you that your blood is sterile. It's not sterile. That's why they put gloves on. No, that's not why they put gloves on. Your blood is not sterile, because think of it, how do you get malaria? If the mosquito bites you here, how does it get to the liver? It travels in the blood. So you can see a parasite in the blood. And parasites and bacteria spread in the blood. How would it get from your toe to your brain? That's the way it does it. So that is your blood on the inside. You know, the Bible was right again when it said that life is in the blood. Here is another little crystal in your blood. And that just also shows that, you know, you're perfectly working, functioning, normal human being. because we do see those in people. What we do want to do is to balance it out, and you'll see in the next session on supplements how we do balance that out, because it's very important that we do. If we don't, we can see some terrible things in there. We can see, for instance, that your liver is functioning quite good, because we do see sometimes lines in between here. And if those lines are secreted, we can see that you have liver stress. It's called fibrinogen. And all interesting things, you know. We can see if you had a hamburger, you know, little pieces of hamburger floating inside there. Good. And now we have to move on, unfortunately. And the next part that we're going to come to is the heart. And the heart is an amazing part. It's amongst others, if we only look at it physiologically, it's just a pump. You know, it pumps millions of times during your life. In, out, pumps the blood all the ways. But it's also an emotional center of the body. And it is not just, it's not just fairy tales. It is the truth. There is actually emotional energy connected to this thing. We can call it a double barrel pump. And Fred's heart will sit right about here. Okay, so it's basically in the middle of the body here. Right in the middle, and it's covered by the two lungs on either side, and then you have the rib cage. So the important things are really protected. You know, if somebody kicks you in the stomach, that's okay. It's just, you know, we'll just push back the guts. But this is protected by all the ribs here, so that you do not get damaged easily. So if they want to do an open heart surgery, they have to cut through all the ribs in the middle here and open it, and sometimes they can take out the heart and open it. And on the inside are the different chambers of the heart, which we're not going to discuss in great detail, but it's amazing to see the cycle, how the heart pumps. It is a very, very electric organ. I mean, if your electricity in your system goes down, you're in trouble. And that's when they come with a defibrillator and they go, and they give you a big kick and this thing wakes up again. I've actually witnessed open heart surgery, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So what they do is they let Fred lie down on a bed. They take the temperature of the bed down, cools it down really, and then the heart comes to a standstill. Then they cut it open, take it out, and when they take it out, you know, they can change the valve on the inside, do what all is needed, and then they put it back together, but it's still dead. It's not functioning, it's dead. And so then they, the old one doctor that we knew, he would just go and say, come on, and he would just give it a tap like that, and then suddenly the heart will start poof, 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 poof for the next 100 years. And if it doesn't, they have two little spoons called also a defibrillator, but an internal one. It goes, toof, gives it a tiny electric shock, and the heart starts pumping again. If it doesn't, well, you wouldn't have been here today. So it fits right in the middle there. An amazing piece of equipment. Just to give you an idea, the heart is about the size of your fist. And if you've ever witnessed open heart surgery, to replace the heart and the two lungs is a machine that goes from, is a machine basically the size of this table. The lung is a thing this big, which replaces these two little things called your lungs. The heart, the actual pump that pumps instead of the heart when they're doing, because listen, your blood needs to keep circulating while they're doing an open heart surgery, because otherwise you wake up and you're a vegetable, or you don't wake up at all. Sorry, is a very big machine that size, about that high, and it has different pumps, you know, that runs. And you can't pump the blood with a normal impeller, you know, like when you have in your washing machine. You can't do that because you saw the little red blood cells, they just get damaged and you die. You don't have enough oxygen. So they actually take a pipe and they squeeze the pipe like that, like you would milk a cow. Same thing, and it runs there and it pumps the blood. Amazing. But your heart doesn't damage it. So an amazing piece of equipment, the heart. You've got different vessels. You've got arteries, which are usually denoted as the red ones. They are the ones that take the oxygen-filled blood out of the heart into the system. into Fred's system, and then you have the veins, and the veins come back. And as you'll see in the bottom here are the kidneys, and the veins goes to the kidneys, so because the blood needs to be filtered again. And it takes out all the toxins out of the blood. And then you have the tiny capillaries. They go from the arteries, and they go out. If you look at your eyes, you'll see those tiny red capillaries in your eyes. Tiny, tiny, tiny. They're basically so small that just one of those little blood cells can pass through it. It's got tiny holes in it called lumen, and that's where the blood seeps out into the other cells and back in, and amazing. And then you have obviously the veins. So you have the arteries, which takes the blood out, and the veins, they bring them back. The capillaries make sure that every tiny little muscle cell or tissue cell or eye or whatever gets those blood that you saw on the screen just now. And it's got the valves on the inside. If you look at it, you can see in this here, there's valves on the top there. And you also have the 4 different chambers of the heart. Amazing how they pump, so that one sucks it in, one pumps it out. One sucks it in, one pumps it out, constantly. An absolutely electric wonder. The interesting thing is with a newborn baby, how do you think a newborn baby gets oxygen on the inside of the mother? It uses the mother's lungs to get the oxygen. And the oxygen flows through the umbilical cord, into the baby, back out again constantly. And his heart's beating as well, poof, 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 constantly. And when the baby comes out of the mother, he's born, he goes, and he swallows and tastes and smells air for the first time. Inside the heart is a little valve that closes, so that from now on, baby doesn't use mother's oxygen anymore. From now on, the valve is closed, and it now uses its own little lungs to get the oxygen filtering inside there. And that's why, by the way, if the baby is born, don't cut the cord immediately. If it's possible at all, keep the cord there, because it may take a few minutes for that valve to go close completely. And so baby doesn't get blue. He can still use mother's oxygen. So now we get to the lungs. The lungs are these two things that engulf the heart here. If you put Fred's heart back, the lungs are on either side there. So they will fit in here. And so they cover the heart. And the lung, very interesting, because the lung changes the CO2 back into the air. So you inhale oxygen. There's 21% oxygen in the air in this room, maybe a little bit less by now, I can see. And some of you are going, oh. Why is that? Because your body says, oh, I need more air. So you need more air as there's less air in the system. Why is that? Because Fred's brain tells him, wait, there's not enough oxygen. Open the mouth wider so you can get more air in. And that's exactly what happens. So more air comes in, and it goes into the lungs. It's so light that it is the only organ in the body that can actually float on the water, because it's mainly air on the inside. The area of the lung is 25 times that of the skin. So don't think you're only that big. You're way bigger than you are, just by your lung size. The nose, incidentally, is the air conditioner. The nose sees that the air that comes into the lungs is not too cold. It heats it up. If it's too hot, it cools it down. So that the alveoli on the inside of the lung, the little air bubbles, don't get damaged. So you can see it's a good idea that you don't smoke, because those aren't controlled by the aircon. It goes straight in here, unless you stick up the cigarette your nose, which I haven't seen most people do. Then we have a very interesting little valve here. It's called the epiglottis. That's interesting. That's the thing that if everything works well, and it usually does, unless you're at a banquet, have peas, and you take the pea and you chew it, and it will obviously go into the wrong hole in the back of the throat. It goes into the wrong hole, and what you then find is that a burst of air comes, poof, and you go, That's the epiglottis that when it's stimulated, it sends a burst of air outside of the lungs, even if you have virtually no air in your lungs. And then you go, and you cough again because it has to shoot it and blow it out. So it's a very interesting protection mechanism on the inside. And so it can be stimulated by mucus as well. And so what we do is when we take a cough medicine, we shut that valve down, or that system, we shut it down. So now the mucus runs into your lungs and you get lung infections. So not a good thing to shut the system down. So the kidneys is down here. They basically filled with blood on the inside. They're also a filter to the system. They excrete the waste into the bladder. You can see they run down into the bladder. And the bladder is just a very strong little muscle kept inside where it accumulates. And some of you may need to get that emptied at the end, because if you don't, it'll send very unpleasant situations. It will just send a signal to the brain, say, when we get a chance, we need to go to the loo. We need to go, we need to go, we need to go. And as the signal becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, the brain says, we have a problem. All other systems abort, run. That's usually, and that's part of the brain as well, the way it works. Now, the urine is 95% water. Bear that in mind, because I'll share some interesting facts which you may want to go practice afterwards. I won't recommend, but you may want to. It's 5% urea. That's what gives it its smell. And some people will say, and the other 95% is your vitamins. Well, we'll see about that. But there were some common uses for urine. The ancient people used it for soap, because it's 95% water. It was used as a mouthwash by the American Indians. It is actually in South America a refreshing drink. And in modern times you have seen this, and there are actually people that drink it. It's a therapy, a urine therapy. Personally, I wouldn't do that, but you may want to. So interesting uses for that. And then we get to the master, which we've discussed. You can see various times the brain came into discussion. Why? Because it runs the system. It is basically called mission control. So just imagine this. You're walking along the pavement and you're counting the bricks on the pavement, and suddenly you hear a shout. "Hey!" And your eyes widen and your muscles tense. And suddenly you gasp, you grab more air and you jump poof, into the bush. And your heart pumps faster because now the muscles need more blood and all those things run, and adrenaline is secreted, so you can actually jump. You know, although you're a geriatric, you can jump. And you fly into the bush and you're safe. Why? Because your neighbor's child was just floating by on his skateboard. And the brain saved your life. So in less than a hundredth of a second, it made more than 100,000 calculations. You looked around, you saw this coming on, you saw the speed, you saw I can't move here because there's a car coming this way, there's a bush there, between the car and the thorn bush, I'll take the thorn bush. He made all those decisions, plus speed up the heart, secrete adrenaline from down here, which is the adrenal glands on top of your kidneys. Amazing. It's called mission control or emergency control. Now, if you run into that mode constantly, you'll be in trouble. But it's also your own path lab. It's your own laboratory on the inside, because inside there it monitors the pH of the system, the pH of the blood, the heart speed, the blood pressure, the blood sugar. You can think of anything, the digestion, all of those are handled by mission control. It coordinates every one of your trillion cells can be coordinated. Every one of the cells in your body can be coordinated by the brain. It does not just control systems. Every single cell in your body can be controlled by this. Absolutely amazing. It keeps tabs on the internal functions. All of these that we just spoke about, all of these are the internal functions. But it also keeps tabs of menial things like the room temperature, the guy sitting next to you fiddling with whatever, yawning, scratching your head, checking out the people around you, listening to the lecture, all those things are kept, you know, just as a byproduct of what's happening inside the system. So no Pentium 4 or dual core will ever get to this. It is amazing. And yet we don't even use all of it because there's spare capacity. You've got cache that's not used up there. And this, friends, is what makes us human. Isn't that just awesome how we are put together? So maybe you have a little bit of a better understanding and maybe also a little bit more respect for what happens in your body. Don't abuse it. It is an awesome piece of mechanics. And there are emotions and energy and electricity and water and nutrients and all kinds of things involved in it. You don't want to abuse this guy. It's the only one that you have. It's the only one that you have.